Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo. What's going to go on with the San Francisco 49ers into the future? What have we learned about all of these quarterbacks so far that we can take into the future, into 2023 and beyond, and maybe a little 2021 NFL redraft as well mixed in with all of it on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock with Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Download the game. Just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Football GM. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. All caps Locked On in the game store. Ultimate Football GM. All right, Croc, a little exercise. And I put out a fun tweet because of how much Brock Purdy has changed the idea of what's going on with the San Francisco 49ers now and into the future. We keep getting questions about, who's going to be the quarterback next year? Do you trade so-and-so? What happens here? What happens there? And since the 49ers have this long week, we have an extra day to kind of talk about some of these things that maybe normally, in some of those post-game recaps and pre-game stuff, we don't want to talk about the 2023 49ers too much. And I don't even want to get into 2023 all that much today, even though that is part of all this and evaluating young players and building a team going forward. And Croc, both of us kind of look at football from a scouting perspective, and I'm definitely of a team builder mindset more so than an X's and O's mindset when I break down football. And so today, let's talk about Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, what we know about these guys, what we don't know about these guys, which is a big part of all of this, and maybe even have a little fun exercise of redrafting the 2021 NFL draft based on hindsight and what we know now. So, Croc, let's start here. What have we learned about Brock Purdy so far in his young career with the San Francisco 49ers? And did you maybe raise an eyebrow when and I know a lot of people are talking about it and asking me about this, when Kyle Shanahan this week said in a press conference that that Brock Purdy was the most prepared, or no, what was the wording he used? I don't have it in front of me. Gosh dang it. He said Brock Purdy was the most, was it the most ready quarterback? No, the most mature quarterback? The most mature rookie quarterback he's ever had, or something like that. And a lot of people hear that, and of course it goes to, he's saying Trey wasn't mature, Trey wasn't this or that. But clearly, I don't think that there's anything wrong with Kyle Shanahan saying that, because we've seen Brock Purdy do that. And Brock Purdy had about 10,000 more passing yards in college than Trey Lance. So he's played a lot of football. So maybe he was more ready for his first moment than Trey Lance would have been. But we kind of already knew that coming into it anyway.
I think if you take your emotions out of it, which I think we do on this show, we take our emotions out of however we feel about the 49ers, and we look at these situations kind of from a bird's eye view on what it is and what they are, right? And if you just say one guy started for 4 years in college, the other guy started for 1 year in college, you would assume that there is a different level of readiness that this other guy will have. And I think for Kyle Shanahan, really being able to experience a guy with so much just the playing time and what he's going through and all the different scenarios. We saw him slide right at the sticks in the last game and knew to stay in bounds, not go down too soon, but not too late, right? And just, he's probably been through that situation how many times, right? So there's this thing of just doing. And I think it was my guy John Middlecoff, right? I listen to a lot of John Middlecoff, and he talks about how he went to Cal Poly. And Cal Poly, their motto is learn by doing. And when you do as much as Brock Purdy has, you learn so much. And there's just this little or big, just a little bit more readiness. And I think you're seeing that. And I think Kyle Shanahan is seeing that. And he's like, yeah, I can win with this. That's all Kyle needs, right? We talk about the 49ers and their quarterback play. And the standard for Jimmy Garoppolo has been set kind of low, right? It's like, hey, Jimmy, just don't mess the game up. Make a couple throws. So if you get another quarterback who we've talked about it, the guys that they're comparing him to in the sense of win losses for Kyle Shanahan is Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard, right? Like that's who you're comparing Jimmy G to in the sense of win-loss. So it's like that's not a high bar. So if you have another quarterback that comes in and he's able to give you that level right there, and maybe even a play or two more than what Jimmy gives you, I think like it's like, hey, I can win with this, which we've seen Kyle do, and that's what he's doing right now with Brock Purdy.
Absolutely. Would you agree then we can set Jimmy Garoppolo aside just because of where he's at contractually? Can't franchise tag him. He's going to be a free agent. With the emergence of Brock Purdy, that kind of closes the door more on Jimmy Garoppolo. And of course, you should never speak in absolutes with the San Francisco 49ers, as we have learned, or the NFL, because you wait 6 months and you're going to be surprised about what's going on in the league, right? So, but with the emergence of Brock Purdy, you got young Trey Lance. I think the 49ers aren't going to spend a bunch of money to bring Jimmy Garoppolo back. Most likely, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that Brock Purdy's done is proven that he's at least probably a backup caliber quarterback at least, and who knows, maybe more. But enough so that you would bring back Brock Purdy and probably not feel the need to do anything with Jimmy, let him go and find his new team in the offseason.
Yeah, I think you and I definitely tap dance around speaking in absolutes. And I think we were probably the most bullish on Jimmy Garoppolo not being a 49ers quarterback in 2022. And once that happened, I'm like, gosh, I mean, you just never know. But
Right.
I'm going to go out there and say it. With how Brock Purdy has played, at the very least, even if whether he's the starter or he's a backup to Trey, however it works out, which I think a lot of people are leaning towards him potentially being the starter, I would assume that the emergence of Brock Purdy makes it to where you don't need Jimmy Garoppolo because of his readiness, his preparedness, right? And even for, let's say he is a backup quarterback, hypothetically speaking. Well, those are the things that you want in a guy that's behind a starting quarterback, the things that he gives you. You know, why do guys like Chase Daniels last a long time in the NFL? Guys like Case Keenum, some of these guys that hang around because there's a certain level of readiness to where, hey, if I do have to go in, I can play well enough. And I think even Brock Purdy right now, and most people would tell you, he's giving you that and some, right? He's giving you more. It's like, well, how good can he be?
Mm-hmm.
And you're still trying to figure that out. But at the very least, even if you're like, all right, we're going to the season, Trey Lance is our quarterback, you know you have a legit quarterback backing him up. And again, potentially a starter. We'll see how it plays out.
So that way we can focus a little bit more on Trey Lance and Brock Purdy then going forward, because I think we both feel the same about Jimmy Garoppolo as we're talking right now in December of 2022. And who knows how that might change going forward, because we know that things can absolutely change and the NFL is chaos. So that aside, let's focus a little bit more on Brock Purdy and Trey Lance then. Would you say, Croc, that you would feel pretty good about Brock Purdy, knowing what you know now about Purdy, and maybe he falls on his face the remaining regular season or into the playoffs or whatever? We'll see if Jimmy or Trey even is able to come back at some point in January and they join the team, as unlikely as that is still with those guys and their injuries. Brock Purdy, let's say Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo weren't an option, didn't exist, and you have Brock Purdy. Would you say, okay, let's go ahead with
Which is the current situation.
Is the current situation for now, but I'm talking going even into the future a little bit more. Would you say you've seen enough from Brock Purdy to say, oh, this guy's probably good enough to compete at starting quarterback or just be the starting quarterback for your football team in the next year, and you're formulating your offseason plan? Are you saying, oh, we're going to go out and get a quarterback to be above him, or we're going to go out and get a quarterback to compete with him, or we're going to go out and get a quarterback to park right behind him? Just Brock Purdy, and Trey Lance doesn't exist.
I think at the very least you feel confident with what you've seen so far that he can go into a season and be a starting quarterback. You know, just off of one, the team, the head coach, you know, the roster, the weapons. We've heard Kyle Shanahan, you know, on record, or one of his coaches say, you know, the scheme makes the quarterback, not the other way around. And if you have a scheme that can enhance some of the things that Brock Purdy brings, which so far he's brought legit, you know, pretty good accuracy, playmaking ability on the move. He has this kind of level of not really being scared of the moment, clearly. If he has butterflies, I can't tell. So I think all those things lead to at the very least, give him an opportunity next year to be a starter if you don't have any other quarterbacks. Or even if you do, but yeah.
Okay, next, a little bit more on Brock Purdy. What it means for Trey Lance, what Trey Lance means for Brock Purdy. We keep getting asked about, do you trade one of these guys potentially in the offseason? So more on that, more on Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, what we know about these guys, what we don't know about these players, what we can project, and why they are so different, and why it's going to be a fun 2023 because of some of the arguments, but I think we can get some of this out of the way right now before we even get to 2023 next. Today's episode brought to you by our newest partner, Ultimate Football GM. Super excited about this mobile game, Ultimate Football GM. I'm sure many people listening to this podcast love playing football video games and grew up playing football video games as I did, and maybe dreamed of becoming an NFL GM, managing your football franchise from top to bottom. Well, your dream can come true with this game, and it is definitely for you if that is the case. Manage every strategic aspect of your football team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for everything, hiring and firing the right coaches and coordinators, what kind of scheme you're going to run with those coaches, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft. You're getting naming rights, everything running an organization you are in charge of. And all this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM, completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. I'm already in year 2 of my franchise on Ultimate GM, trying to lead my San Francisco football team. And it's tough. I had a couple of bad years to start, but I'm climbing up toward 500 as Kyle Shanahan did. It took him a few years as well to get there. Locked On 49ers listeners can get a 100% free boost to their franchise too when using promo code Locked On. That's all caps, one word, Locked On, in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps to make sure you check it out today. Get your free 100% boost of player development points and download the game. Just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. That is ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate GM. Start your dynasty today. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at Turo. I utilized Turo recently, the world's largest car-sharing marketplace, to get my butt up to Lake Tahoe and have a little fun in the snow. I needed a 4x4. My car is not really made for that sort of dumping of snow that was happening last week. And luckily, you can go to some place like Turo and get yourself a 4x4 if that's what you need. You can go get yourself a spacious SUV or minivan to take the family on a road trip. Maybe you want a classic or luxury car for a special event, a birthday. You want to roll up in style, you can do that as well with Turo. Tons of cars available, just economy. You need to get point A to point B. Test drive an electric vehicle, whatever it is. And many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the United States, UK, Canada, and Australia. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. Okay. Croc, we talked a little bit about what we know about Brock Purdy, and it's been really fun to watch. It's been such a great story with him being a 7th round pick. And now you consider what Trey Lance is, and he almost couldn't be more different as a prospect. Much less experience. The very top of the draft. You could only be 2 draft picks different than what Trey Lance and Brock Purdy are. You know, literally the last pick in a draft and the number 3 overall pick in a draft. It'd be even more amazing if it was in the same draft class. But, back-to-back years, pretty amazing. We'll talk more about the 2021 draft, the top of that, and how that might look in hindsight. But what we've seen from Trey Lance, there's a lot to like there. And we keep getting asked the question, do you trade Trey Lance in the offseason? And the reason you bring in someone like Trey Lance, Croc, and tell me if you agree with this statement or not, you don't bring in Trey Lance for what he was going to look like in year 1 or 2 necessarily. You bring in Trey Lance for what he might look like in years 3 through 15. And that is an important amount of context versus what we've seen already from Brock Purdy. And even if out of the blocks, and hey, Brock Purdy's got that 10-yard split, right? Even if out of the blocks in their NFL careers, Brock Purdy got out to a quicker start than Trey Lance did, that doesn't mean that Trey Lance won't eventually blow by Brock Purdy. So when you talk about Trey Lance, now is just the exact wrong time to give up on a guy this talented, because I don't think what we've seen so far, which we haven't gotten a chance to see enough because of some of the injuries now and didn't play hardly at all as a rookie, we haven't seen what the reason they brought him in. We haven't seen that yet, right? And so I'm kind of dancing around my statement here. It turned into a very long statement, but essentially we don't know enough, but we still know all the things we liked about Trey Lance, which is why you don't give up on him yet. If that makes sense.
I think if you ask anybody who, again, they take their emotions out of it, you would say at some point you have seen all the things that you drafted him to be, you've seen him do it. Now, have you seen him do it consistently? And I would say no. But what goes into him, becoming that more consistent quarterback? We would assume for a guy with as limited playing time, snaps, live reps, it would be just out there playing. And unfortunately, that has been derailed by injuries, having a more QB ready right now quarterback on his roster, aka Jimmy Garoppolo, and now even potentially Brock Purdy. But I was texting some of my buddies the other day, and we were talking about it in this quarterback class, and we're watching Trevor Lawrence, and I know we'll get into it. But I said, man, Trey Lance was drafted to the wrong team. And you would think that it was the best situation because of all the weapons around it, but the expectations for the team and what Trey Lance was were so high that it was kind of a lose situation for what he needed. And if he were drafted to a Jacksonville Jaguars or a Chicago Bears, then a lot of the things that he needed to go through, he would have been more afforded that. But just from the standpoint of ability and talent, skill, upside, like he has shown you that. He's made all the throws that you would like to see him make. He has made the plays with his legs that you would like to see him make. But also there's been the misses that you don't like. Also, there has been the injuries that, you would love to do without. But I think ultimately, in the sense of just kind of where he is right now, you don't know where he's at. And I think that makes people uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. Not, going all the way through year 2 and still not knowing exactly what he's going to be at the next level. You would like to see something, whether it's rookie year or even this year, to build off of and say, oh man, he did this well. And let's talk about like Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott, his rookie year, great scenario, came in, hey, you just got to do the bare minimum, hand the ball off to Ezekiel Elliott, throw the ball to Dez Bryant, throw the ball to Jason Witten, and we're good. The next year, it was this just downhill. He lost Zeke. Witten was getting older. Dez, whatever, was off the team at that point, and it wasn't good. He looked crappy. And there was this process that he had to go through, but you had already seen him play well for an entire year. I think with Trey Lance, not seeing him play well for an entire year and then coming back injured, it makes people uneasy. It makes me uneasy and uncomfortable with.
What's crazy is after 2 starts plus another most of a game for Brock Purdy, he's almost thrown as many passes as Trey Lance in his 2-year career. And he's already thrown 20 more passes than Trey Lance did as a rookie. So we haven't had enough opportunity. Like, we feel like we barely know Brock Purdy, right? It's only been a couple games, but he's already got as much experience as Trey Lance does. So that shows you how little we know about Trey Lance, and Trey Lance's experience is much more sporadic.
Even going back to college. And that's a big part of it as well.
Oh yeah. And then you go back to college and it's just like, literally, like you almost can't play more than Brock Purdy practically. You can't play less and still get in the league and be that young as Trey Lance. That's what made Trey Lance such a unique prospect. And he needed the reps, which is your point about, man, okay, he needed to go somewhere where wins didn't matter as much and reps could be achieved starting from first snap, first week of his rookie season.
It would have been really nice to see Trey Lance start as a rookie for the 49ers coming off of a 6-win season, because then it would, at that point, it wouldn't have mattered. Now, it wouldn't matter for Kyle because he had one winning season in 4 or 5 years or whatever it was. But just in the sense of, if the 49ers went out there and won 8 games or 7 games, nobody would have really batted an eye. It would have just been like, okay, well, they went out there with a guy who needed experience playing. Where is he at now? But you kind of go with the veteran, which understandable, Jimmy Garoppolo. You go to an NFC Championship game, and then now you got to get rid of him or supposedly get rid of him and go with Trey Lance, who still needs to play. That's tough for him. Right. And I think some of the things that we're seeing from Brock Purdy, right, and just this baseline level of play that's like, hey, I can make a play, I can make a throw, like good decision maker, etc. It's almost like you're just thirsty for just to see just that, and not even for how you could potentially get more. But Trey isn't really getting that opportunity for his own reasons. But I'm just saying, just again, take your emotion out of it, just for what the situation is.
That's what's going to make this so dicey going into 2023. So let's say there's a quarterback competition or whatever between Brock Purdy and Trey Lance. And even if Trey Lance is your quarterback going in, it's going to be rough because we've seen quarterbacks like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence this year, and both of them are starting to play better and better. And both those franchises are starting to think, oh man, we finally got a guy. But it didn't look like that their rookie seasons, and it didn't even look like that to start this year. If you're the 49ers again next year, are you going to can you wait until week 9 to see that from Trey Lance when you've already seen it from Brock Purdy to start? And so
here's the thing.
So interesting, and it's going to be so hard, and that's why it's tough to have the patience for the young quarterback when you're built to win versus a team that's not built to win and doesn't have that option to go, well, maybe we can just sneak in here with some wins and get this other quarterback playing, even though this guy could take us to a different level.
Right. So you look at Justin Fields in his first year, right? And this was a guy who played in, it looks like games played, 12 games, and probably started 11 of those, right? Because I remember he came in against Cincinnati Bengals. In his first start, he had 1 net passing yard. 1 net passing yard, and was sacked 9 times. 1 net passing yard, right? And it was kind of like whatever, because you didn't really expect anything out of him. And the team wasn't that great. You know, he had Mooney. He had guys like Allen Robinson, Montgomery in the backfield, had some running backs, Herbert, whatever. But 1 net passing yard. And you kind of just let him play through that. Ultimately, after 12 games, 58% completion percentage guy, but threw more interceptions than he did touchdowns. 10 interceptions, 7 touchdowns. Well, this year, and it hasn't all been great, but you just see this. Okay, he's getting it. He's starting to get it. You're starting to see how dangerous he could be. His completion percentage only jumped up 3%, and that doesn't mean that he's just more accurate, but went from 58.9 to 62. His average average yards per attempt up. He's thrown 15 touchdowns to 10 interceptions in just as many games, pretty much, right? So you're just seeing this where it's kind of this steady kind of progression of starting to feel a little bit more and more comfortable with what you're seeing. And now going into year 3 is going to be, okay, just how can he build off of what we've seen? Then you get Trevor Lawrence, and he was tagged as the generational prospect. And the 49ers had an opportunity to draft him. I'm pretty sure they would have taken him. But you see the difference. Again, this was another guy who in 2021, who played the whole year, who started a lot in college, a lot of experience, right? And again, team not great, etc., whatever. But 12 touchdowns and 17 interceptions as a rookie, under 60% completion percentage as a passer. And then you look at this year, 66%, right? So he jumps up almost 7%. Completion percentage, more, again, average yards per attempt, up just like Justin Fields. And touchdowns, 24 touchdowns and 7 picks. And even then, like you said, early on, it didn't quite look like that. Early on, it was like Trevor Lawrence still not looking great, but now he's picking it up. You watch him against the Dallas Cowboys, and the moment wasn't too big. And it's like, well, he had experience in college. And then you see what he's done with his experience in the NFL, where there's been ups and downs. And we just talk about being afforded that. I think you need that. I think you need that. Unless you are okay with Brock Purdy, who I would assume that none of our listeners would take Brock Purdy over Trevor Lawrence. And why would you take Trevor Lawrence? Because he's just more talented. Why would you draft Trey Lance higher? He's more talented. Being more talented does not mean that you will be better. I want to make that very clear. Being more talented doesn't mean that you're going to be the better quarterback. We've seen tons of top draft picks flop. We've seen some guys with lower draft status have a better career for the most part. But how do you get to that point, right? The other guys, they've had to play. They've had to go through ups and downs. Trey Lance is no different than those guys. He has to go through it. But in the time he's supposed to, this is a winning team. And you're a little reluctant to go that route.
With the hindsight next, looking at the top of the 2021 NFL draft, what would the 49ers now do at 3? And some of the lessons from Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence specifically applied to Trey Lance going forward next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. If your year-long fantasy leagues didn't go great for you and you're sitting on the outside looking in of your fantasy playoffs, which started for many fantasy leagues this week, why not go play daily fantasy? And you know what the great thing about daily fantasy is? It's season every single day for you. And you can play every single day, every day of the week. You don't have to wait for football on Sundays. All you do with PrizePicks, it couldn't be easier. You pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on that entry. You're not competing against other people. You're not competing. You're not putting together an entire team. You're just picking those couple of players that you like, and you like their projections more or less, or like their what you project their output to be more than their projections at PrizePicks, and you could win. Just you versus those projections. And we're talking tons of NFL projections, but NBA as well. This is every day. NHL, PGA golf, college football, college basketball, men's and women's, WNBA, esports, soccer, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, even disc golf and Euro basketball and cricket, and tons more projections at PrizePicks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. Play yourself some fantasy every single day. Just download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code Locked On. So if you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. You deposit $50, you get $50 more from PrizePicks to play with. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On and sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. I want to look ahead or look back again. You were talking about Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence's statistics. And if you wait until halfway through basically October, so you take the first 5-6 weeks out of it, which both those players again started slow in their sophomore seasons. Justin Fields, since week 6, 7 games started from week 7 to week 15 for Justin Fields. He's completing 67% of his passes now. He's got a passer rating of 99, and he's got a 11-5 touchdown to interception ratio. That's just throwing the ball. That's not talking about his 718 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns there. He just went over 1,000 rushing yards for the season. They started using him a little bit more as a runner. That opened up the offense. He's starting to get a little bit better as a passer. He's making a difference for this awful football team, and they're competitive in games. And even though they're still losing a lot, they're losing a lot of games by 1 score, which they did again against the best team in the league, the Philadelphia Eagles, but made that a lot closer than a lot of people expected, and a lot of and the Eagles probably wanted that game to be. So it's pretty phenomenal to see how good he's starting to become, and he has so much more to go. But you draft a player because you want him to hit that immense upside that he has with his arm talent and his leg talent, and he's actually running the ball better than he did in his college career. And then Trevor Lawrence, from the same time frame, or 1 week earlier, starting in week 6, he's played 9 games starting in week 6 through week 15. He's completing 68% of his passes now, has a 101.5 quarterback rating, and a 16-3 touchdown to interception ratio for Trevor Lawrence. Like, that is the development you want. That's why you draft your quarterbacks high, and they have the upside to achieve this level that could really carry your franchise and for a decade to come. So that's why they drafted those players. That's why the 49ers drafted Trey Lance. And we were talking off the air when you were asked from some friends or some listeners and people hitting you up on Twitter at Eric_Crocker. They're like, how come Brock Purdy wasn't drafted high? Because he looks like a player that should have been drafted a lot higher. And it's because of the upside, right? It's because of that attainable level of high level play that Brock Purdy could play really good and probably should have been a lot higher than the last pick in the draft. But there's a reason that all the players he's compared to were not high draft picks either, right? Because you're drafting the traits of what a player could become. And if maybe Brock Purdy is going to be the next Tom Brady, I don't know. But there's a reason Tom Brady was drafted in the 6th round as well.
Right. And there's the guys that I've talked about Taylor Heineke. Would you watch Taylor Heineke last night? And I thought he made some plays, did some good things, threw the ball down the field, made some plays with his legs, made some throws. And there were some good things in that game. He gave Washington a chance in that game when his offensive line wasn't protecting him. But there's kind of this, he's in that realm of a quarterback. You've heard people throw out the names and comps. And listen, the comps don't mean anything but just kind of, hey, this is what he reminds me of. He can definitely be more. Or he can be worse. But Case Keenum, that's another guy that people are throwing out. And right now you're seeing Brock Purdy compared to guys that are similar to him. Not really big in stature, not the biggest arm, whatever, lacking something here and there to where it's like, kind of we'll see. And he's in that range as well. That's why he was a late pick. But that doesn't mean that you can't be better. It doesn't mean that he can't be better than a Trey Lance, right? It just means typically guys with his skill set aren't the best quarterbacks in the league. And if you look at who's winning Super Bowls outside of Tom Brady, because that's he's an outlier, right? If you look at it outside of him,
you
who
wouldn't
are the
project
guys?
somebody to become Tom Brady. Like, that's not a thing you should project. It could potentially happen. Like, Brock Purdy might be the next Tom Brady, but you should never project that. And there's a reason that that Kirk Cousins isn't the next Tom Brady, even though he's pretty darn good and he's a starting NFL quarterback.
Right. So you just kind of see that. And the question was, well, why is Trey Lance comp to these guys that are like, Josh Allen and stuff like that? And it's like, well, because his skill set is more similar to those guys. Not meaning he'll be that, not meaning he'll ever be good, but his skill set, his ability, his high upside is more comparable to the guys that go in the top 10 of the draft. Like, and that just kind of is what it is from that standpoint, but it doesn't mean that's how your career is going to play out. So I think people have to kind of understand that aspect of it. Even with Brock Purdy, for him to be good in the NFL for a long time, he would be an outlier. I was talking about Case Keenum, right? And Case Keenum had a season taking over with the Minnesota Vikings where he won. He went 11-3 as a starter, threw for 3,500 yards in 14 games, which is good. Threw 22 touchdowns and 7 picks in, again, 13 games or 14 games, which is good. Won a playoff game with Drew Brees on the other side. Like, those are all good things. Now, can he sustain that over an entire career? And that's the part that's a little harder when you maybe don't have as much talent as other guys to carry your team through the ups and downs. I'd say right now, Brock Purdy is suited to have a Kirk Cousins type season when you have Debo, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Kyle Juszczyk, Kyle Shanahan. You are suited to have that type, and maybe you can sustain it over a long time as long as you have that. But a lot of times people start losing weapons, losing guys due to injuries, and then do you have the ability to kind of overcome that, or have you built yourself up to that? And it's just a little harder. So doesn't mean he can't. Doesn't mean he hasn't been awesome to this point, but it's just there's a reason why guys like that go a little bit later. Yep. But it doesn't mean that that's how their career has to turn out. He can be a Hall of Famer for all we know.
And you watch the Bills and Dolphins, and Tua's played really well this year. But then in that game, Josh Allen makes a throw to Gabe Davis, and you're like, okay, well, my guy can't do that throw. And that's the extra bit of elevation upside that you're looking for, that you're trying to chase when you're drafting those quarterbacks. And if they hit and they do all the little things and can facilitate the offense and be efficient, and then they can give you the other stuff and do extra, which we've seen Patrick Mahomes do so many times, saw it against the 49ers in the Super Bowl. That's what you're looking for. And that's the big difference there. And that's why a lot of teams chase that. And when you hit it, you're like, heck yeah, we got this for a decade, and that's going to elevate our entire franchise. And that's what we've seen.
Difference.
Some of the plays make it like, wow, he belongs in that category. That's why you chase that, and you live with some of the ugly stuff, and you hope you can develop through that.
The difference between the top guys and the Brock Purdy, whatever he's going to be, right?
Yeah.
But the difference between the guys you consider elite and then the guys that you consider, oh man, this is a legit starter or a high level backup, whatever. It's really only a couple of things. One, consistency, and then two, the difference of 3 or 4 plays in a game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I can't line up Brock Purdy and say, hey, Brock Purdy, shorts and a t-shirt, can you make this throw? Or, hey, can Brock Purdy make this throw once? It's just in a game when need be, like I was watching Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert playing against the 49ers, it wasn't great. You had Jimmy Garoppolo on the other side. Jimmy Garoppolo won the game, right? Maybe Herbert didn't make enough throws, but there's not one person listening to this podcast, or maybe there is, I don't know. Maybe Emmanuel Acho, if he listens to it, but you wouldn't take Jimmy Garoppolo over Justin Herbert. Why? Because of just the ability of this few throws where it's like, this other guy just can't do that or won't attempt it. And we watched him. It was a 14-14 game. We've watched Brock Purdy be on the team that put up 35 points, right? So, but in a 14-14 game, you see his guy, big moment, game is on the line. He rolls out and just throws a laser that's like 6 yards off the ground for like 40 yards in the traffic, on the money, hits a guy, boom, first down. And you get in position to win the game. And it's like, well, that's kind of the difference. Now, you would hope you don't have to put your quarterback in that situation, but even Justin Herbert, he's had to overcome a lot. Coaching isn't probably as good as 49ers. Running back, he's losing Austin Eckler, has to depend on him. His receivers, he has Keenan Allen now, but for a stretch of the season, he's playing without Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. And he needed to keep this team afloat in a situation that's less than ideal for a starting quarterback. And it's just a few plays a game where it's like, okay, he's keeping his team in these games. And sometimes when you go up against a juggernaut like the 49ers, okay, I can't overcome this. And we saw that for a ton of years with Matthew Stafford in Detroit, where not being able to overcome a bad organization, right? Where it's like, yeah, I have Megatron, but outside of that, I don't really have much. And I'm supposed to go out here and win week in and week out. Everybody's, oh, he can't win again. He can't do this. Well, he goes to the Rams in 1 year and makes enough plays. Fortunately for a dropped interception and 49ers blowing the lead, but you win the Super Bowl, and there's kind of this talent thing there. So it's not as big of a difference from a play-to-play basis as I think people think, but it's that one play that can happen that maybe these other guys can. I saw Trey Lance throw a pass against the Bears, the layer throw over, 3 guys and in between the other guy to Ray McCloud, where I'm like, I don't know if Jimmy is attempting that throw, especially that far downfield, right? Like 25 plus yards down the field, throwing that ball where it has to go up and then go down, and his ability to do that. And it's like, okay, that's the difference throw. Or, 3rd and 13 and you run for 14 yards and get a first down. Like that one play, that's a little different, Now, we try again, we go back to the consistency. That's where he's lacking. But the ability and hoping that you build towards consistency, that's there.
And we've seen Trey, do that. We've seen Trey make those throws that the other guy can't, right? And the other guy being Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo. But you have to be efficient on top of it. Can Trey get there? I don't know. And we've already seen a lot of that from Brock Purdy, which makes this fascinating going forward. Knowing that you now have Brock Purdy, though, and now that we've seen some other players from the 2021 draft play, and I'll just ask you this question point blank. We don't have time here to get too in depth on this one. We'll talk a lot more about this kind of stuff in the offseason and have some fun. But 2021 redraft, here's how I'm going to call it. Trevor Lawrence goes number 1 overall. Jacksonville Jaguars ain't giving that back now. And some people push back when I put this out there on Twitter. And it's like, you haven't been paying attention to what happened with Trevor Lawrence in the last 2 months because he's really coming on. Because someone's like, oh, Trevor Lawrence wouldn't even go 1. He's trash. I'm going to put Micah Parsons at number 2, difference-making edge player for Robert Saleh's defense. Definitely him over Zach Wilson for the Jets at number 2. And they've kind of got their Brock Purdy and Mike White doing some things over there for them. Although, would they take the quarterback at 2? I'm not sure. But if it's Lawrence 1 and it's Micah Parsons 2 to the Jets, do the 49ers still take Trey Lance? Or with hindsight now, knowing you have Purdy, do you go away from quarterback or do you do a different quarterback and take someone like Justin Fields at number 3, Croc? Again, knowing what you have, and this is hindsight. It's a hindsight question here. And you get to have the knowledge of today, but you get to draft number 3 overall in 2021 over again.
Is that the Jamar Chase draft?
Yep. Jamar Chase.
Jamar Chase he's a downfield guy. Does that mesh with Jimmy Garoppolo? If you're like, all right, we're just going to stick with Jimmy G. Or
well, you get Purdy too.
These quarterbacks now.
And you get Purdy too, because in hindsight that you get to draft Purdy in the 7th round the next year. So we're talking.
Yeah, might go with Jamar. And I'm not big on taking guys in the top 10 receivers, pass catchers, but might go with Jamar Chase. I might go with him. Got an elite player, right? He's elite.
You go Chase over Justin Fields or Trey Lance right now. Here's the thing with Justin Fields is we've at least now gotten the chance to see it because he got to go through his growing pains. And we haven't gotten to see it quite yet, even though there's a lot that we have that we've seen from Trey Lance. We haven't gotten to see that, some of the results that we've gotten to see from Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. So that's why and when I asked the question, the most popular answer was Fields, just barely edging out Trey Lance. A lot of people still, for good reason, still like Trey Lance. And he's already your guy, and you've already got a lot of number 5 jerseys out there. Those were the 2 most popular. And then the next most popular was Chase. Penei Sewell was in there. Slater was in there.
No Mac Jones?
And zero Mac Jones answers. 0. Not even making jokes about it. People were just like, yeah, people still hate Mac Jones, and they hated him in the draft for the most part.
He's thrown more interceptions than touchdowns this year.
Yeah, that's going way bad. That's another podcast for another day. Not only does he not have the high-end talent to elevate your team, now things around him are bad. Coaching is bad. Just not a good situation in year 2 for Mac Jones. He's going the opposite direction that Fields and Trevor Lawrence are.
Real quick,
Fields was the number 1 answer from the listeners. I would probably still take Fields there, but that was my pick at the time. And we've at least got to start to see what that looks like, which is really electric stuff from Justin Fields, even though he's got a lot of work to do. And if he gets there with that, my gosh, look out. He's Josh Allen level stuff. And Patrick Surtain and Chase, if you're going non-quarterback, would be the real
and J.C. Horn, he's actually playing
J.C. Horn too.
Yeah, I know he got hurt, but
that whole secondary. TJ Henderson's starting to play as well for them after trading for him.
The one pushback on Justin Fields would be his knock on him coming out of college was he held on to the ball too long. Like, it just, whether it took him a long time to process or if it was the downfield option routes that guys were waiting on, whatever it was, like, that was kind of the knock. Holds on to the ball too long. If Kyle Shanahan is my head coach, I don't know if you can coach that out of him. Maybe you can, but I think that's something that would drive Kyle crazy. Just not being able to drop back, foot in the ground, get the ball out. And because if you wait, like, this whole offense is predicated on timing and rhythm. And if you can't process it quick enough with what Kyle wants, which is tough. That's why it's an easy offense, because if you can make that throw, you don't have to be Justin Fields. You can be Brock Purdy. You don't got to be Trey Lance. You can be Brock Purdy, right? To make that throw. But it's so predicated on that. Would Fields holding on to the ball a little too long just kill Kyle? Like, I hate this.
We got to go because we're already over time here, but this brings up another can of worms, and we'll again talk more about this stuff in the offseason. But judging by the way Kyle used Trey Lance, I would think Justin Fields would be fine but the way Kyle's using Brock Purdy is different, and I think Kyle wants a Brock Purdy, which is why I think this is going to be a quarterback competition next year. I think Brock Purdy has a pretty good chance to win it because he does those things, and Kyle Shanahan wants that type of quarterback. And he
wants to make the quarterback, want the quarterback to make the system.
Yes. Because when you think about how Kyle used Trey Lance and how Justin Fields is being used now in the NFL, what does Kyle want?
And he says he wants that, but then he doesn't. Like,
right?
He says he wants that.
And and Trey Lance could do the Brock Purdy, can run that same Jimmy Garoppolo Brock Purdy offense. Why was he so focused on, the zone read stuff with Trey Lance?
Yeah.
Did he feel like he needed those training wheels? And it's okay if he does. Justin Fields
we've watched him. We've watched him make all those throws. Now, maybe he doesn't do it as efficiently as Kyle would like. But it's like, well, Kyle, how do you get him to do that? I guess it is running the read option stuff to get him through it to where until he is that efficient. But
I think you nailed something, because time to throw, he got the ball out quicker and operated in the pocket a lot more in college. Trey Lance did. But his time to throw as a rookie was, I think Justin Fields and Trey Lance were the two longest time to throws in the NFL. So I think he hit on something there. It was time to throw. It's like, you're not getting the ball out quick enough, fast enough, in timing, anticipation. So we're going to do this other thing on offense until you get there. So I think he would have felt the same way about Justin Fields, which is probably not ideally what he wants.
Right. And he really liked Kirk Cousins, but then he said, Kirk Cousins isn't my ideal quarterback.
Right.
I would want the biggest, strongest, fastest, best quarterback from the pocket.
But he said he would still want Drew Brees from the pocket, but then Lamar Jackson for the rest of it, But
I think he's fighting with himself.
From the pocket first.
There's this internal fight within himself on being stubborn enough to hold on to the Kirk Cousins, but knowing in his head, like, if I can just let go a little bit, then I can have a guy that does more, but I just can't let go. Can't let go.
We got to get out of here. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for making us your first listen. Check out Peacock and Williamson. Check out Locked On NFL Draft. Be back tomorrow, Winky Wednesday. We'll be doing a crossover with the Washington Commanders, getting ready for Week 16. Talk to you then, right here, Locked On 49ers.